Sometimes it's just so stupid that you find it hard to know exactly what to say. We're going to do one of those today. Somehow I find the words, but my brain hurts, and after we're done with this, yours will too. Get your bottle of extra strength aspirin ready because this is going to be painful. All right, I'm going to be honest up front. I just wanted to get rid of this. I think it's the last of the Barak Lurie videos that I've had piled up on my list, and as everybody ought to know by now, I think Barak Lurie is one of the biggest wastes of human skin around. He might be as bad as Daniel King, although for completely different reasons. Lurie is one of those people who is so self-assured that he's right and everybody else is wrong that you just want to slap him in the face. I mean, I wouldn't or anything, I'm not a violent person, but I think he's in the same category as people like Todd Friel, and there are a bunch of them. I mean, Mike Winger's getting pretty close to that class, to be honest. Therefore, I'm just going to call a moratorium on Barak Lurie for a little while, because he just gives me a headache.
To believe in God with all the positive consequences that flow from that, it may suggest that there really is a God.
No, that's stupid. The only way to get to a God is to show that a God actually exists. This is doing everything that I criticize. It doesn't matter what you want to be true. It matters only what actually is. Now, we'll have to see where he goes with this. I can imagine a lot of places that he could wind up, and none of them are remotely intelligent, but this is just, I really want to believe. Well, so what? Grow the hell up.
Hi folks, Barak Lurie on the Barak Lurie channel. Thanks for tuning in. Today you hear a lot about people claiming that believing in God is a delusion. In fact, there is a title of a book called The God Delusion.
And it is. It's not that hard to recognize. Just look at the definition of the word. A false belief or judgment about external reality held despite incontrovertible evidence to the contrary, occurring especially in mental conditions. Now, I don't know that the evidence against it is incontrovertible because I don't know that there's any such thing for any position. We can't prove, for instance, that there are no leprechauns. Non-existent things don't tend to leave behind evidence for their own non-existence. That doesn't mean that belief in leprechauns isn't delusional. A delusion is something that you hold for no other reason than you really want to hold it. And that describes religion perfectly, doesn't it?
But indeed, is it a delusion? Let's talk about delusions first of all, and see about whether or not they're actually healthy.
No, they're actually not healthy. Are you mental? Wait. Don't answer that. Had he said, is it comforting, then yeah, I probably would have agreed. It probably is comforting for the mentally immature. But that doesn't mean anything. I'm sure a child with an imaginary friend is comforted by the idea that they are not alone. It might even be forgivable up to a certain age. However, by the time that kid grows up into a supposed adult, they'd better have put that imaginary friend away. Adults shouldn't believe in Santa Claus. Now, a kid might be really comforted by the idea that there are going to be presents under the tree on Christmas morning. But adults can't be that stupid. There are higher standards for adults than for children. God is just the adult version of Santa Claus, and we need to stop giving the religiously delusional an out just because so many people out there are out of their ever-loving rational minds. But let's let him continue because I'm sure this is going to get really stupid.
If you had a friend who said that she was the Queen of England, and she's not the Queen of England, you would say that's not very healthy for you. Bad things are going to happen to her in terms of not being able to work, in terms of not being able to have relationships or a family for that matter. it's unhealthy.
It is. Now, I never knew anyone who thought they were the Queen of England or anything like that, but I did know somebody many years ago who really thought they were part of Starfleet, and I mean literally. She would run around wearing a Star Trek uniform all the time. I mean, she would go to job interviews wearing it, and she could never understand why she wasn't getting hired. I think it was because she was nuts. Now, I'm going to try and predict what he's going to say next, and hey, I could be wrong. It happens. But you would still be nuts even if everybody in your society also thought that they were part of Starfleet. It is not a reflection of actual reality. Now, if you lived in a world where there was no way to tell if you weren't part of Starfleet, then you might get a momentary out, at least as long as you never discovered that the whole idea was just completely insane. However, that is not the world that the religious live in today. They have no excuses. So, let's see how I did.
Likewise, if someone thought that he still had a job that he doesn't have, he's been fired a long time ago, he's not moving on with his life, and that's, in a way, unhealthy for him as well.
Okay, I agree with that. That's another example. Because remember, going back to the original definition that I gave, it is holding a belief about external reality despite evidence that it isn't actually the case. However, I could go farther than that. Going back to my leprechaun example, just saying, well, you can't prove me wrong, doesn't prove that your position is rationally justifiable. Nobody has to prove you wrong. You have to be able to support your contention that you're right. If a reasonable person, and that's somebody who is examining the real world through logical and rational eyes with an understanding of the actual evidence at hand, if they don't agree with you, then you've probably got some problems. And I think the religious definitely fall into that.
Or a guy thinks that he's still with his girlfriend and he's chasing her and even stalking her. That's not healthy for him nor for her. They both need to move on.
Again, agreed. Can we please get to the point? I mean, this isn't a long video to begin with, and he's already wasting a lot of time in the middle. If he has any more examples, and I have no clue if he does, then I'm just going to fast forward through to them to try to get to some kind of meat.
These are delusions. We all understand that, right? Yet people call believing in God a delusion. But this particular delusion is an interesting one, isn't it? Because it turns out that by believing in God, a great number of wonderful things happen.
So what? Now, I could take any of the examples that he's just provided, and I could cook up any number of potentially wonderful things that could happen to the deluded based on those beliefs. Just because you gain comfort from a thing, that doesn't make that thing true. And that's what we really need to be talking about. Now, I know the religious don't care about that. They're just looking for that comfort. But we can point out all kinds of demonstrably harmful things that adherents really like. I mean, rampant drug use. Yeah, it feels great when you're on it, but that doesn't make it a good thing, does it? There are all kinds of negatives that come with using drugs all the time, including physical and psychological addiction, etc., etc., etc. You just can't say, well, being hooked on heroin is great. Look at all the subjective benefits that I get. No, you're just an idiot. So we have to look at both sides and see which of them has the most demonstrable effects. Not just the things you identify in your heads, not the subjective things that you like, but the demonstrable effects that are actually verifiable in reality. Because remember, your fee-fees don't mean anything. So, yeah, go right ahead, Barak. Let's see what you got.
Right? You have a sense of purpose. Your health seems to improve quite a bit. In believing in God, you end up having a stronger family. You're less engaged in the issues of worry and fear. You're not obsessed with drugs or alcohol.
All of that is very, very questionable. We can take apart every single one of them and show just how ludicrous the claims are. I mean, I hope you're not a Jehovah's Witness who needs a blood transfusion because, yeah, you're kind of screwed. And worry and fear? I mean, you believe in an all-powerful wizard in the sky who is watching over you every second of every day, ready to punish you for entirely arbitrary wrongs that usually make no sense, so that you can roast for all eternity in a lake of fire. Yeah, there's nothing to worry about there, right? There are some things that you can, in theory, get from religion, mostly things like social bonding, that kind of stuff, but stronger families? Sure. Why do Christians get divorced at a rate as much as 25 times higher than atheists? I mean, come on. This is just counting the hits and entirely ignoring the misses. Just how dumb can you be?
Far more likely that you won't engage in crime, for example.
Not remotely true. Again, we can go back to the FBI crime statistics, which show that with prison entry statistics, the religious are far more likely to be incarcerated than their numbers on the outside, while atheists are far, far, far less likely. Friendly Atheist did a video on this a while back, so instead of just going through all this again, I'm just going to link to that video below. Go take a look. We'll just say that he's wrong and move on.
A lot of positive things flow from a belief, a sincere belief in God, in going to church or a synagogue, as the case may be. These are healthy things.
This is just correlation is not causation. You can get those exact same things without religion, as we've shown around here plenty of times. This is, as we keep saying, a matter of counting the hits and entirely ignoring the misses. Why? Because they have a vested interest in not seeing them. It's why Catholics, whenever the question of pedophile priests comes up, they tend to try to point their fingers elsewhere, right? Well, other people molest children too. Sure, but they don't have an entire power structure dedicated to hiding that abuse from the outside. They don't have a system that moves pedophiles around so they can victimize children elsewhere. They don't have an active political body that works hard to see that none of these crimes ever come to light. If you ever get, say, a child molesting teacher, for instance, they're on their own. Everybody wants to put them in prison, including the parents, the schools, the government, etc., etc., etc. When you get to the Catholic priest, though, they're shuffled off to Buffalo with little more than a pat on the wrist, and they get to do it again over and over again. But they don't want to talk about that, do they? Wonder why.
What's not healthy is a belief in something that doesn't exist.
Do you want to tell him or should I? I mean, I agree that's not healthy, and since we have no evidence of any kind that your imaginary father figure in the sky is real, that's kind of a problem for your side, isn't it? I mean, I didn't say it, you did. Now, of course, I'm sure he's going to try to turn that around, but we're not going to let that kind of overt dishonesty that the religious tend to display stand, are we? So, take it away, Barak. Make a complete fool of yourself.
So if you believe that elephants are about to give all sorts of gifts to you from the sky, that's not healthy. It's not living in a world of reality.
Neither is believing in gods, because this is the point that we need to take away from videos like this. And we do see the religious trying this all the time. Oh, but religion has all of these benefits. Okay, so what? The question here is any of it true? And the answer, sadly, is no. Not that we can tell anyway, using any evidence that anyone actually has at hand. Your delusions, even if it has positive benefits on your life, that doesn't stop it from being a delusion. That's the whole point of his video, right? The title is Believing in God a Delusion? Let me shake my 8-ball because signs point to yes. Stop making excuses and get a grip on reality.
And that's the question. If you accuse somebody of believing in God as believing in a delusion, you have to ask yourself, is this delusion the same as all the other delusions we talked about?
No. The only question that needs to be asked is this belief actually true? And the answer, whether he likes it or not, is no. This is a classical example of him trying to run around with the goalposts. He doesn't give a damn if it's true, and that's kind of the problem. If he cared if it was true, he wouldn't have spent half of his video going, well, look at all this other good stuff. He would have just presented objectively verifiable evidence that his God was real. Why can't they do that? Well, it's a damn good question, right?
I put it to you that they're not at all the same. To believe in God with all the positive consequences that flow from that, it may suggest that there really is a God.
It does absolutely nothing of the sort. That's the stupidest nonsense I've heard today, and if you know anything about how much of this crap I look at in a day, you know that's kind of saying something. This is just proving that Barak Lurie is an imbecile, and I don't think that's exactly a surprise.
That fulfills our sense of purpose, our sense of meaning in a world where we need that meaning, where we have that sense of ambition, that sense of making the world a better place.
In other words, it just makes me happy, so it's gotta be true. But that's not how this works. It's just not. If you want to solve social disconnection, like he's got on screen, you know what you do? You provide a way for people to interact with other people. They don't need to interact with your imaginary friend. They need other human beings. You don't just sit there and lie to them. You don't just make up nonsensical stories just because it provides a sense of emotional comfort. You stop spreading the bullshit. It's not that hard.
Without God, we don't have that sense. At least logically, we don't.
Sure we do. Now, maybe you're too dumb to figure it out, but most people don't need imaginary friends in the sky to get through the day. That's why there's something wrong with you people. You are lacking something that most people have. A brain. A capacity to survive without religious lies. There is something broken in your head. You need to learn how to cope. I mean, this is really not that difficult. Rent a clue.
So I put it to you, perhaps not believing in God is the real delusion. I'm Barak Lurie. Thanks for watching, and we'll talk with you next week.
No, you won't. I am done with this dipshit for a while. Every word that comes out of his mouth ought to be embarrassing. It is, but he doesn't know it. For him, he's so far out of the reality loop that he can't understand that everybody else is just laughing at him. The comments on this video are filled with people laughing at him. I mean, I had to make a copy of this one. Good show, sir. Good show. Because this is how I feel every time I'm unlucky enough to see one of his videos. And to be honest, it's not just him. Pretty much all apologetic videos make me roll my eyes because they're mostly this dumb. People like Lurie and Daniel King, they kind of take the cake, but at least Lurie can pronounce words most of the time, and he has a clue how to edit, sorta. But that's about the only difference between the two. This is really, really, really sad. This is just another video where you have to point out to theists, you know, this just makes you look dumb, right? It's really too bad they can't get it through their heads. It's really too bad they just don't care. What the hell is wrong with these people? I don't know. You tell me.